just so now Lindsay's pressed the record button. We're going to start. So my name's Eileen Rowden. I'm one of the trainers here at PMO Learning. So also one of the directors with Lindsay here. Just a couple of other people who've got their cameras on. Hannah's there.
Hello.
Hannah. So Hannah's our course administrator, so she supports all of our delegates on the course. And then Lindsay is also there, my fellow director, who helps run the course and also leads in the whole kind of marketing for the organisation. So I'll be taking you through the session today. I am one of the trainers of this particular course. And I've worked with House of PMO to actually kind of set the whole certification up. So hopefully I know a little bit about what's included and how it's delivered. Just a little bit about PMO Learning. So those of you who might not have come across PMO Learning before, we are a specialist training provider for people who work in and around PMOs. Lindsay and I set this company up nearly 5 years ago now, as we identified there was lots of training companies that looked at project and program management, but there was nobody who specialized in training for PMO. So we've set that up. We've continued to grow year on year. Our training is particularly interactive. So we're very conscious that a couple of the exams, including this course, is there. A couple of our courses are there to deliver through to exams, and we absolutely are focused on getting people through the exam. But we also hope that we give you whatever course you do with PMO Learning, you get something that you can take back and apply in the workplace following the course. And one of the reasons that we're confident that we can do this every time is because all of the trainers that we have at PMO Learning have all had, and some of them actually still do, have a day job working in a PMO. So important that we have that real kind of practical experience, so we can actually kind of talk to people on the course about our experiences of working in a PMO, and we can just kind of provide some real practical examples of how the theory has been applied. So the purpose of today's session is really to give you an understanding of one particular course, which is the House of PMO's Essentials for PMO Administrators. And the idea is we'll give you an idea of how we do delivery from a virtual perspective, but then go into a little bit more detail in terms of exactly what's covered on the course, just to give you hopefully a better idea before you sign up for attendance or somebody else that you know is going to attend. So first things first, in terms of actual kind of delivery in a virtual classroom, I think as the pandemic hit across the globe, lots of organisations went to virtual learning, but there was still really a little bit of confusion about what was involved in terms of virtual learning. And people assumed it was going to be very much a lecture style. So you'd have somebody kind of like myself kind of sitting here one side of the screen. We would have lots of people listening in, and it would be very much kind of, well, we'll just kind of listen, almost kind of a passive delegate sitting in the background like you would listen to the radio. And we would suggest actually that's not necessarily the case. That's much more akin to a webinar where you've got kind of somebody talking all of the time and the delegates are just listening. What we try to do here is very much try and replicate the classroom, in that if you're sitting in the classrooms, you will be able to see all of the other delegates, you'll be able to chat to the other delegates. We will have plenary conversations so people can join in and have a conversation, and they'll be going off to do exercises. And typically in the classroom, we go off to some flip charts and we'd all play with writing on the flip charts and present them back to the rest of the group. And all of that, when we do our virtual learning, we have the opportunity and the technology to support us. So we do have some kind of ground rules. We do ask people to have their cameras on. We do ask them to kind of minimize, so it's not the time to kind of, well, catch up on the emails during that session. Very much kind of keep focused on the training. We actively involve all of the delegates, so we will maximize the number of delegates on each training course to 12. Anything above that becomes very difficult for the trainer and the delegates really to have kind of the right level of interaction. We are constantly technically aware, so we have technical support in the background at all times, and we're also kind of very conscious that we need to be careful that we actually recognise that people are potentially in a home environment or an office environment, and so there are some limitations potentially in terms of kind of how we might play through the day. From a technology perspective, for our public courses, we do use Zoom, similar as we do today. So we will have videos, we will have the PowerPoint presentation, we utilize chat. You'll see that Lindsay's put some things in the chat box. So we will continue to do chat through the day. Zoom has a great facility for breakout rooms where we will actually kind of go off into groups, and we will use polls to take some take the temperature or get some questions answered as we go through the course. We do also use some other technology. We use something called Mentimeter, which is a more kind of dynamic online polling software. We'll use Miro, which is a large whiteboard, and we also use Trello, which is a Kanban board, but really good for doing lists. One of the things we also do as we go through this is you will get detailed joining instructions from Hannah, who provides you with all of the kind of the log-on details for each of these systems. None of these systems will have any cost to you as the delegate. They're all either kind of free accounts, or you can just use them from Zoom. So that kind of gives you just a little indication in terms of kind of how we deliver the courses. In terms of this particular certification, people may not necessarily have heard of the House of PMO and what the certification involves. So just want to be clear about who the House of PMO are. The House of PMO is a professional body that was set up last year in 2021. And as it says there on the slide there, it's really a place for people who work in and around PMOs can have access to materials, set up certifications to help people develop themselves, support the development of others, and actually contribute to the development of the PMO profession. And very much this certification course is one of the first certifications that was released by the House of PMO, and PMO Learning was the first organisation to actually run the PMO Administrator course. So, and we've absolutely got links with the House of PMO. Lindsay and I are both members of the House of PMO, and we would recommend anybody who's interested in working in the PMO, go and have a look. There is free membership available on the House of PMO website. So, in the context of, kind of setting up training for PMOs, one of the things that was really missing from the whole kind of global offering of PMO certification courses was anything that was for people who were moving into the PMO who really had no experience and no knowledge and expertise in and around project and program management. And so this House of PMO course, Essentials for PMO Administrators, is really about providing a beginner level understanding of the role of the PMO administrator. So it actually looks at providing some information about what it's like about working in a project environment. So when we say P3M there, what we mean is project, programs and portfolio management, and PMOs, and just understanding what it might mean to work in those at that part of the business. We'll talk about the key roles that work within the PMO, and then we cover off the key competencies that are required to be able to successfully undertake that role. Now, what this course won't do is make you the best PMO administrator in the world. It also won't accredit you to say that you are, you know, a kind of a competent PMO administrator. The idea is that we're saying actually you have sufficient knowledge to be able to kind of start the role of a PMO administrator. So it's applicable for people who haven't got a PMO administrator role, or somebody who's just moved into the administrator role. The course itself is based on 3 core texts. Now, I always kind of a bit nervous about putting these up because it looks as though they're great big huge tomes. They are quite, there's a lot in the books, but we're only touching a bit from each text for this particular certification. So the first core text is something called the PMO Competency Framework. So this was a certification that was produced by the House of PMO, again released last year, that basically said these are all of the competences that you will need to undertake any role within working within a PMO, regardless of the level or organisation. And what we've done is we pull out the key elements of that and say these are the bits you need for a PMO administrator. If you buy the course through PMO Learning, you will get a copy, a hard copy of the competency framework as part of your joining materials. The second core text is something called the PMO Service Catalogue. And this, as it says, is an insight into what PMOs do. And again, if you've not worked in and around a PMO, you may not necessarily have an understanding of the types of activities that get undertaken by a PMO. And this book, and quite a large book, gives you some really good understanding of the breadth of things PMO can do. Now, in the certification, we only pick on a small number of these services that are relevant to the PMO administrator, or examples for the PMO administrator course. But we do provide the full text, again, as part of the cost of the course from PMO Learning. Now, the final core text, and actually it's also a website, so the website www.praxisframework.org is definitely something I would recommend you go and have a look at. It's a free resource that basically tells you all about projects, programs, and portfolios. There is a small book there which you can purchase. We don't provide the text because everything you need is on the website, and we do refer back to the website as required. But again, we don't do everything. We just pick out what's relevant for the PMO administrator. So those are the 3 core texts. And the reason why we have some reference text is because at the end of your 3-day course, there is an examination to take. Now, you don't do the exam as part of the course. The exam is done at a future date. So you'll get an exam voucher and you'll be able to arrange the exam at a time that suits you. So it's a 45-minute exam. You've got 60 questions. And it's a 50% pass mark. So you need to get 30 of those questions, trying to do maths in my head there, 30 of those questions right to be successful. It is a closed book exam, so you will need to remember the things from the course in order to pass. And as I said, when you're successful, what you've demonstrated is you have sufficient knowledge and understanding of the course in order to undertake the role of a PMO administrator. Okay, so that's the whole kind of certification setup. As I said, our trainers are all very keen to help you, to give you sufficient knowledge and understanding to pass the exam. So we have a series of practice questions we go through the course. But again, what we don't want is we don't want to spend the whole kind of 3 days saying, oh, you need this for the exam, you need this for the exam. What we do is make sure that you understand what it means in practice, how it might happen in your organizations, and give you some examples of how it works in a number of other organizations. And I have to say, one of the great things we found on the courses is that we absolutely encourage conversations and sharing amongst the delegates, and a lot of the delegates kind of share each other's details and keep in touch with each other following the course as they kind of move into the administrator role, and so they can continue to share learning and experiences. So what's actually kind of covered on the course? What is it? What are the types of things that we're actually kind of going to cover off? So it's, as I said, it's a 3-day course. We cover off the whole of the first day. Because we recognise there are lots of people who do an administrative role who've perhaps never come across projects and programmes before, the first day is really trying to get us in touch with that whole kind of PMO context. Day 2 talks about the different roles, and we introduce 2 of the generic competencies that will probably take the vast majority of the administrators' time and effort. And then on day 3, we will do the specialist competencies. We'll have a quick review of the exam and the final close. So I thought it'd be worth just kind of popping into a couple of the different sections so you can see what's involved in each of the days. So day 1 is very much, as I said, learning about projects, programs and portfolios, and all about PMOs. And we introduced this kind of this first element. So we're just getting some background noise. The first element is about understanding this whole kind of project, program and portfolio management, and recognizing why organizations have projects and programs. And we talk about the fact that actually from a project and program perspective, what we're trying to do is to deliver the required objectives of projects and programs to our stakeholders in a planned and controlled manner. So we don't just kind of do things, we actually, the whole kind of project management element is to make sure we've got things that are planned and we execute in a controlled manner, which means that we have to ensure we have processes in place that allow the correct governance of that work and the correct management of that work, both effectively and efficiently. And we do recognise that, as I say, people coming onto the administrator course may not have had any experience of formal project and programme management. So we do in the first day kind of take you through that in quite some detail so you understand what they are about. The important thing is about really understanding how projects fit into organisations. And many of us will work for organisations who, and we understand actually how that kind of organisation runs. So typically we would have an organisation structure where we have lots of the kind of the same departments in whatever organisation you're working. So we'll have a finance department, we might have an HR department, we might have an operations department, a logistic department, a marketing department. So all of those activities, all of those kind of what we call business as usual activities are there to ensure that we can sell things to customers, we can receive payment from customers, always a good thing, but that we can pay our staff, that we can do kind of advertising and marketing, we can pay our suppliers. It's all about running the organisation and kind of to keep it ticking over. Now, any organisation who just did those things, who just kept the company ticking over, would very quickly become unsuccessful. We have to do other things. We have to change the business to move with the times. So working practices will change, technology will change, our customer expectations will change. We'll want to sell new products and new services to our customers. And so changing the business, changing what we deliver is somewhere where project and program management comes in. So typically our business as usual about is how we keep the business ticking over. Projects and programs are used to introduce changes into the organization. So a number of you might have already kind of recognized you're part of a project or been kind of been impacted by a project. So I suspect many of you have had an office move or a restructure in your organizations. And typically these will be run as projects and programs where they will have a project manager who's responsible for managing all of the changes that are required for kind of setting up the new office, the new building, moving everybody into that. The project finishes and we're all back into doing our business as usual roles. Now, organizations will typically have a number of projects and programs on the way at any one time. And some of the interesting aspects of understanding what happens from a change the organization perspective is recognizing what changes are required by that organization, because typically in organizations we don't have time to do all of the projects and programs that we require. So if I think about PMO Learning, we've probably got, you know, kind of a good dozen new courses we want to bring to our delegates. We want to kind of upgrade some of the courses that we've got. We want to introduce more e-learning. There's lots of projects that we want to do, and therefore we have to decide and prioritize which projects are the right projects to be running at any particular time. So there's some work to be done, and typically, again, that's part of the whole kind of change the business element, and part of the work we would do from a PMO perspective is to help the organization identify not just which projects we want to do, but what order we want to do with them based on priority and also the strategy of the organization. The other element that we also have to be very careful of is understanding how those changes are then rolled back into the organization. Can you imagine your organization if all of a sudden we said, right, then on Monday we're going to be changing the finance system, we're going to be changing how we log on to our systems, our websites are going to be changing, we're going to introduce a new telephone system, and all of that's happening on Monday morning. We wouldn't actually be able to do our job. So again, one of the things that we have to do within the change the business is work out how and what order those things need to be translated back into business as usual to make sure our organizations continue to run. And I'm interested, anybody in chat who's got some experiences where somebody's an organization has implemented a change and it's not worked. There has been, you know, in the last few years, we may all have been impacted by, there's been a couple of banks who've implemented changes to their banking systems, and all of a sudden come the weekend, nobody had access to their cash, the cash points didn't work. And again, that happens in organizations. So part of this kind of new ways of working and products back into running the organization is part and parcel of the work we do. So we learn a bit about this kind of what it means to kind of to do these kind of changes as projects and program management. And then we start thinking, well, actually, what's a PMO about? What do PMOs do in organizations? And from a PMO's perspective, the PMO there is to make sure that those projects and programs and portfolios, actually, we oversee them. So we're not the project managers who run the project, we're not the program managers who run the programs, we're there to provide the ecosystem and the infrastructure to make sure that all of the outcomes and benefits of those projects and programs are actually, as it says, they're measured, managed, monitored and refined. So there's a specific part of the organization that says we help the organizations make sure we set up projects, programs and portfolios correctly. We make sure all of those are delivered well and roll back into business as usual. We do recognise that there are different definitions of PMOs. We've listed there 3 from Axelos, who's based originally government developed information, the Association of Project Management, which is the kind of the UK Association for Project Management, and PMI is the Project Management Institute, which is an American-based global institute around project and program management. And one of the things that the House of PMO and PMO Learning say is we don't want to tie our particular kind of our organization to one particular professional body. So regardless of whether your organization does agile projects or whether it does Axelos, it does Prince 2 and MSP, or whether you're aligned to PMI and you've done your PMP certification or CMP certification, all of the information that we're going to talk about in our PMO courses is relevant. So we do recognise that PMOs can actually be at different levels. So there are some PMOs who support projects, there are some PMOs that support programs, and there are some PMOs that support portfolios. And again, what we cover off, we'll cover off project, program and portfolio officers. And if you're a lucky person, you might get to support all three. There is one other kind of special type of PMO, which is called a Centre of Excellence, which is there to define all of the standards, the processes and procedures that are used in the delivery of projects. So again, the course will touch on all four of those aspects and give you a little bit more information in terms of what's involved. And we always find this is a really interesting part for discussion, because a lot of people who come on the course, not just this course, but also the analyst course, the next course. So, well, actually, it's really interesting to understand kind of where my job fits in terms of whether I recognise we actually spend our time supporting projects, or actually the work that I do is more at a portfolio level. So just starting to understand kind of how the role might fit in, or when you're applying for roles, start to be able to ask more definitive questions to get a real understanding of the role that you're applying for. So day one, all about project and program management, and then a bit about PMOs in terms of what they do and the types of PMO you might work in as a PMO administrator. Once we get on to day two, we start delving down into the PMO administrator role, and we spend a bit of time in the morning talking about the roles. And then we go on and talk about kind of two specific competencies, and these are really generic competencies. One is about administration in the project context, and then secondly is something called delivery support, and I'm going to come on to that in a moment if you don't recognise those terms. So in terms of the roles, we do talk about each of the four roles, and you'll see there the PM administrator role is the entry-level role, but we also cover off some information about the analyst, the PMO manager and the PMO director. And you'll see in terms of those kind of four PMO roles, the administrator is really there to support the project, program or portfolio manager, but also their teams in any kind of administration and secretarial aspects of their role. We recognise that actually a lot of the PMO administrators actually also do some of the analyst role, and there seems to be in lots of organisations quite a good progression from PMO administrator into PMO analyst, where again from a PMO analyst perspective we are there about supporting the project, program or portfolio manager in terms of they may still do some administrative secretarial support, but their predominant role is actually in helping the project or program manager do project and program management. So as we said, coming in as a PMO administrator is also a good entry level in order to, if you're interested in going into project and program management. Once we're at the PMO analyst level though, we are also will be supporting the PMO manager in improving some of the things that the PMO does. So for example, we may be involved in improving risk management or providing some new services out to the projects and programs. PMO manager's role very much around actually setting up PMOs, deciding on what that needs to be, making sure they run and continue to improve to help the organisation deliver projects and programs better. And then typically in an organisation, you will have a single person who's a PMO director. You may have multiple PMO managers, but you will have a single PMO director. Sometimes we call them the PMO manager as opposed to a PMO manager. And those PMO directors are there to decide on how many PMOs there are across the organisation and what's involved within each of those PMOs. So really we kind of position the PMO administrator and talk a bit kind of how progression goes through from PMO administrator up through the other PMO roles. We then go into a little bit more detail about what's involved from the PMO administrator. We talk in a little bit more detail about the purpose and what that looks like. We talk about what a day in the life might be, and being clear about what the key responsibilities are typically of a PMO administrator. And then we go into some further information that comes from the competence framework. So we talk about the key knowledge areas, so the key knowledge that the PMO administrator needs. And this is really where we start thinking about, well, actually, as somebody who's had perhaps an administrative job, there is lots of knowledge that you have in your current role that you can apply within a project management context. So we go through some of those areas of knowledge, and we also introduce some kind of new areas of knowledge of things that you'll either pick up from the course or things that you will need to kind of learn over your first few weeks and months within your role. Again, we talk about key skills. So you may well have some kind of key skills that you've picked up, just really been working in a working environment. Again, it's about how you apply those skills within the PMO and the P3M context. And then finally, we talk about behaviours. Now, the knowledge and skills, I think most people will kind of recognise as nothing, you know, kind of, yes, we understand about listening skills and kind of administration skills, but behaviours is one we pay particular attention to, because it's the behaviours that really make the difference between somebody who can do the job and somebody who we'd want to do the job for us. It really is about kind of how you do things that make a difference. So we will cover off what the key behaviours are of a good PMO administrator. And we also kind of recognise some other competence frameworks that might be useful for the administrator role. So once we've kind of covered off, we've got a good understanding of what's involved in that kind of PMO administrator role. And I'm sure if you go back and have a look on our website, you'll find a webinar we've done previously on the role, so you can get a bit more detail about that. We then go off into talking about each particular competence. Now, on the course, we do 2 generic competences and 6 specific competence, and again, I'll come on to that. But for each competence, we will talk about basically what that competence is. We'll talk about the definition and the description of that competence. We'll cover off the key terms and artifacts. So what are the kind of the words that you will hear, you know, when you're talking about this particular competence? So some key terms that we'll hear around organizations. And as I've said, you know, they're not specific to one particular methodology. They cover off kind of a whole range of different methods and processes. And it's quite interesting in terms of kind of, there's really quite an interactive sessions where people feel kind of, well, I've heard this term, what does that mean? So our trainers are well equipped to be able to kind of cover off most of those, and if they can't, they will certainly kind of follow up the next day or after the course to be able to increase your knowledge. We also talk about artifacts, so they might be processes, they may be kind of key documents that we have in relation to that particular competence. And certainly on the administrator course, we will introduce you to quite a few number of formal documents that are used around projects and programs. We'll talk about indicators. Now, indicators are in reference to the competence. We will talk about the types of things that you might be able to do if you have got this particular competence. So it's useful for you to be able to kind of recognize what a competent PMO administrator can do when they're displaying each particular competence. We'll then say, well, actually, if we've got people with this competence in the PMO, what kind of things can the PMO do to the various stakeholders of the PMO, to the customers of the PMO? And then finally, we'll give an example in some detail around that particular service. Now, as we go through each of these competences, again, this is not just the trainer kind of walking through in any this is what you need to pass the exam. What we really want to do, we want to make sure that you have a real understanding about the breadth of activity that's included in this. And we give some examples that are specifically from the competence framework and from the service handbook. But what we also talk about for those people of the delegates on the course who have just started their role of PMO administrator, they will perhaps talk about some of the services that fall into these categories. So again, you'll get some people who've started that role, but also people who are moving into or perhaps looking to move into the administration role. We can talk about some of the things that they may make, some questions they have in terms of whether that's going to be included. So again, very interactive session. So I thought it would be worthwhile just kind of looking at kind of what some of those first two competencies cover off, because as I say, what we want to do is to give people the confidence that actually some of the information, some of the skills and experience they've got to date is absolutely kind of transferable into the PMO context. So this is the first competence we talk about, which is called P3O administration. So definition there is very much providing day-to-day support and assistance to the delivery function through a variety of secretarial administration and secretarial administration tasks. And we say, well, actually, well, yes, that doesn't tell me very much, Eileen. What does that actually mean? And which is where the description comes into account. And we say we're actually not just, you're not just a personal assistant to the manager. We could actually support anybody within the delivery function, and it is you can take all of those kind of transferable skills from your administrative roles, so minute taking, arranging meetings, setting up meetings, booking training, making sure we've got all of the packs prepared for meetings. All of that is transferable once you develop and hone your knowledge of projects, programs and portfolios. So that is really kind of the entry level administration. But what we find typically is that from a PMO administrator perspective, you actually do a bit of delivery support. It doesn't take very long for you to be able to provide some additional support in terms of how projects and programs have been delivered. Now, the overall definition is support, coach and educate. Obviously, from a PMO administrator's perspective, we don't necessarily expect you to do the coach and educate. That level of competence might be required from the analyst or the PMO manager, but certainly from a support perspective is something we might expect the administrator to do. And we say, so where it's more effective or more efficient, and provides good value for money, the PMO may undertake some project or program management activity. So that may be, for example, where we've got an action list in relation to the project. We've got some resource queries in relation to the project. The PMO administrator can do them on behalf of the project manager. So project management activities, program management activities that are actually undertaken by the PMO administrator. And we would go through in some detail, given some examples of what they might be, how you use your current skills and expertise, but also again, understanding what's different when working in a project and program to working in a business as usual environment. So day two, very much around the roles, and the afternoon, as I say, we talk about these two different competencies. We'll talk around some specific services with some real life examples, some key documentation, perhaps some new terminology that for you in your move into PMO. Finally, when we get to day three, this is where we start saying, as we get more embedded within a project and program environment, typically there are some really kind of specific competencies that are relevant. And when we were producing the competency framework, we identified 6 kind of key areas where PMO administrators are likely to start getting involved in project and program management activity. So I've listed them there. So risk management, issue management, information management, change control, financial management, and the one that's applicable for almost everybody is reporting, insights and analysis. So on our course, we will take you through each of those 6 competencies. We will again do all of the things we've done with the previous competencies. We'll talk through the definitions, the descriptions. We'll give some examples of specific kind of terms and artifacts that are required. We'll talk through the specific services and again, give some real examples of what that looks like from an administrator role. So the idea is by the time you get to the end of the course, you actually have got a much better picture around where projects and programs sit in an organisation. You've got an understanding about what the PMO, the role of the PMO administrator is, but you've also got an idea of the types of things you will learn as you go through your role, and what you've got is a good starting point now in terms of, oh, that's the wrong, sorry, I meant to just to kind of go back to the course objectives. Let me just get them for you, to have a real understanding of what's involved in that role and how you can use not just the knowledge of this course, but your current skills and experiences in undertaking the role of a PMO administrator. So ideally it kind of sets you up for applying for an administrator role, as I said, or if you've just moved into administrator role, gives you a broader understanding perhaps of what you've got to look forward to in that role. So the chat's been going on. There's not been much. I know Hannah and Lindsay have been putting in there. Thank you for your round of applause, Cor. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask me any kind of specific or detailed questions, or put them in chat if you don't want to kind of to voice them out loud.
We did have a question, Eileen. The core texts given as part of the course, are they hard copies or are they digital copies?
They're hard copies. We will actually kind of post them out to you. You'll get a delivery in the post. So regardless of where you are in the world, we will send you out a competence framework and a service catalogue. The praxis is all through the website, www.praxisframework.org.
It's another question, a roundabout way. I've had them on a direct message, but just in a roundabout way. So if you have got somebody new joining your PMO team who perhaps hasn't worked in PMO before, I'm assuming, I know what you're going to say, this course should be perfect for that, regardless of how that organisation is, you know, have its approach to PMOs.
Absolutely, and I think when people come into a role, into a PMO administrator's role, it's very difficult to give them, in a work context, to give them a real understanding of kind of the breadth of what the role can be and how that fits, because you know they're into day one and they're actually kind of doing activities. This course allows them to kind of just take a step back and get that bigger picture of kind of what they're going to be doing and how it contributes. And I know we've got lots of, obviously we've built up quite a big network over the years, and people have said, you know, I really wish I'd had that when I first started in PMO, so I actually kind of understand what my day job meant in terms of that bigger picture. So certainly the people who've been on the course so far, and you'll see we've got a kind of a huge pass rate in terms of passing the exam, but I've just found it really useful in terms of I actually understand now what I do on a day-to-day basis, how that fits, and how my role can continue to develop, but also allows me to kind of understand what other people are doing around me when I'm doing my job as a PMO administrator.
I think that's it for questions.
Okay, so what? Just a couple more slides from me then. What I've got on there's just when our next courses are. So we've got an administrator running on the 27th, and that's not the 27th. That'll be the 27th to the 29th.
It's the 25th to the 27th of April. The next administrators course.
So you see, this is why we have people like Hannah supporting me in the background, because so 25th to the 27th, Hannah, did you say?
Yeah, and we just had a question in the chat about any practice questions. Yeah, you'll get access to them during the course.
Okay, so 25th to the 27th of April, administrators. We've got another administrators also running in July, the 4th and 6th of July, and I've just put in there some other courses that we also deliver. You'll be able to find all of those information to all of those courses on our website. Now, it is worth saying is that although we can book individual seats, that all of our courses are available to be delivered in-house. So if you're there as a PMO manager and you've got kind of 6 or 7 PMO administrators kind of joining your organization, we can come and run this course or any other course in-house. Happy to do that. If you want to get in touch with us, you can get in touch via telephone. Also, we've got inquiries at PMO Learning, will get or email to us, or you can actually kind of go and book on the website, and there's also the opportunity to talk to us on our website.
We've had a couple more questions. So Course asked if they're virtual. Currently, we're running all of our courses virtually. They're all delivered via Zoom in British time. And we've had another question about in-house pricing. I've just popped my details into the chat. If you were looking to get in touch specifically, thanks, Cor. If you were looking to get in touch specifically for your organisation, if you get in touch with us, we'll be able to get back to you with a quote.
Which is worthwhile asking, Hannah, because information there. How much is the course to book?
It's currently £1,250, so that includes all your materials, your exam vouchers, and obviously the training. We've got an exclusive 10% offer for people who have attended the course today looking to attend the April date, and you can use my details to get in touch and I'll be able to send you over that discount code. We've had another question about taster sessions for the other courses. Yes, we do. We ran a P301 a few weeks ago, and we'll be looking to schedule some more for some of our specialist and other certification courses throughout the year.
Excellent. Well, lovely to meet you all. Hopefully we'll get to see you on the course. Any questions at all, get in touch via or the details on the screen, or as Hannah said, she's put your kind of her personal details on the course on the chat, so you can get in touch with her.
And make sure you get in touch with Anna if you want to get involved in the next course. There's that discount code will be waiting for you. So just get in touch directly and we'll be able to sort that out.
Right. Good to meet you all this morning. This afternoon. Have a good week.
Take care.
Have a good day, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.